Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Michael Kummer was born and raised in Austria and speaks German, English, and Spanish. Since moving to the United States, he has lived and worked in the greater Atlanta area. In his 20s, he was a professional 100-meter sprinter, although these days he does mostly CrossFit. Michael is a technologist and an Apple fan. He loves science and doesn't believe anything unless there's proof. He follows a ketogenic paleo diet and intermittently fasts every day. Michael is married to his wife, Kathy, and has 2 trilingual kids. Michael's goal with his popular blog is to share what he learns so that you can spend time on something else. He is focused on the areas that his readers are most passionate about, including diet, fitness, and technology. He founded MK Supplements in 2021 with the goal of offering the highest quality dietary supplements on the market. MK Supplements is a small, family-owned business that takes pride in delivering the highest quality and environmentally friendly dietary supplements. Michael Kummer, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks for having me, Casey. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's such an honor. I'm not sure how I came across your work, but I'm pretty sure the first blog post I ever saw from you was why I don't eat vegetables. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I like this guy. I like this guy a lot. That was you, right? That was your blog?
Yes, so that was mine. And quite frankly, when I always wanted to write it because I think it's an important message for people to understand that veggies aren't really what we think they are or what most people think they are. But I also figured it would be super controversial and likely not even be, ranked on Google anywhere, considering that, that pro-plant agenda is significantly more powerful, it seems like, than the meat eaters. But it's actually one of the articles that ranks fairly well and drives a decent amount of traffic every day. So it's good that, there is exposure, and I'm glad you found it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we don't eat a lot of plants over here. We've been following basically a carnivore diet for the last 3.5 years. And to say that you eat a high amount of meat is one thing, but to tell people that, like, I literally have not eaten a single vegetable in 3.5 years, people look at you like you're losing your mind. And trying to explain to people,
Right.
like, I even think that fruit or things like rice could be so much more benign for people. But the story around vegetables, like, I'm not touching those for the rest of my life.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. I mean, obviously, everyone has a different way of dealing with some of those toxins that you can commonly found in plants, anti-nutrients and, some of the other defense chemicals that at the end of the day, if you think about it, nothing wants to be eaten. No living being wants to be eaten. Animals fight or flight. And plants predominantly use chemicals. I mean, some have thorns, to discourage someone from eating them, but most use chemicals to deter them from eating at least the vital parts of the plant. It's obviously not black and white. There is I think Saladino says it very well, a degree of toxicity or a spectrum of toxicity. Some plants are more toxic than others, and some parts of a certain plant are more toxic than others. And generally speaking, you don't miss anything if you don't eat plants. If you have a proper carnivore or animal-based diet, that includes, healthy fats, healthy meats, and organs, I would argue are at least an important part of our diet,
Yeah, I totally agree. I'll explain this to my clients sometime by telling them to, like, in their mind, kind of take a raw spinach leaf and start chewing it. And that mouthfeel that you kind of get when you chew that leaf, that's oxalate. You're tasting the
Right.
oxalate crystals, and that's the more mechanical form. And it's basically, I think Monique Attinger explained it to us, that it's basically like eating glass or something. Like, it's the mechanical kind of roughage in the oxalate crystal, but it's really the chemical, the ion of oxalate, that once it slips into the body, it starts binding with other minerals like calcium, and that's where it does a ton of damage for people. And people think they're doing the very best thing. I'm telling people about sweet potatoes and beans and spinach and beets and all these things to avoid, and people always look at me like, but those are the best foods. It's like, no, those are the wrong foods.
Yeah, we've got many things completely wrong and upside down, especially in the last couple of decades, I think. And it's unfortunate, but I think there is now enough information out there. There are enough people out there who push against it and try to educate people. And, on the one hand, I'm positive that maybe at some point, that'll transpire into, mainstream medical, into the mainstream medical field, and maybe, medical professionals get educated on nutrition and what food can do to your body as part of their curriculum and as part of their training, because right now that's not the case. There is no nutrition training. doctors just don't know, and if whatever they don't know, they cannot, tell you. So they just go, with what they've learned. And that's unfortunately in many cases the exact opposite of what you should be doing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think I was talking to Dr. Mark Cucuzella about this recently. It's almost, in a way, it's almost better that the doctors aren't getting a lot of nutrition education, because if they did, they'd probably be getting more of the wrong message anyway.
That's right.
If it further ingrained what we tell people is healthy, and like getting lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and all this stuff. I am encouraged when I look back at all the podcast interviews that we've done and all the doctors that have found the truth. They did it because they were following the same advice that they were giving to their patients, and they themselves were getting unhealthy, and that forced them down that journey that you and I have had to go on as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's great if doctors really have the time to reflect on their patients and the changes in their health outcome. Many just don't have the time. They don't even know who you are until they read your chart 5 minutes before the appointment, and then they have to deal with the next one. There is just little to no time to really reflect on, follow someone's journey and figure out, hey, is this actually working beyond what patients tell you and beyond what's in the chart. And that's just I think a general problem in our healthcare system that's just completely dysfunctional and not working, and driven by the wrong incentives. I think that's really one of the major things. If you get paid by doing certain things in a certain way, then why would you do anything different if your livelihood depends on you going down a certain route? It's
Yeah, that's a great point. My wife and I were just out on a walk, and she was talking about a podcast that she was just listening to with some pharmaceutical rep, like a former pharmaceutical rep. And he explained, like, we would do, these education courses on all the drugs that we would sell, so that we could spit out the numbers and percentages and studies and all this stuff really quick. And we want to get that drug top of mind for this doctor, because he does have about seven minutes. You've got 7 minutes. And this person in front of you may be complaining about, diabetes and high blood pressure and all this stuff. What are you going to do? You're right. If it's your livelihood, it's easier for you to write a script and get that person out of there than it would be to take the time and explain. You just don't have the time. And it sucks, because these doctors are by and large great people, but it's a broken system, like you said.
Right. Yeah. And even, if someone comes to me and says, hey, I'm dealing with this, I don't want to do what my doctor, I don't want to go on statins or what have you. What would you recommend me do? And obviously I'm not a medical professional. I can't give medical advice, but even if I wanted to share what I know, I cannot do this in 5 minutes or even an hour. There's decades of experience and trial and error, and appreciating that everyone is a little bit different. If what works for someone might not work for someone else. Yes, there are general concepts. Cut out most of your veggies, and chances are, if you've got issues, you'll be fine. But even within that realm, there is nuance, and just getting into all of that, it's you almost need like a one-on-one session that spans over several weeks. How are you going to do this? In our current healthcare system, it's impossible.
It's impossible. Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to go back and talk to you about your story. You were sprinting at a very young age, which is pretty cool. Have you always been into sports and into different physical activities?
Yeah, pretty much. When I was a kid, I did judo and played soccer, even though I wasn't very good at it. I wasn't really very good at anything, to be quite honest. I don't think I'm the most talented athlete out there. But at some point, I got into track and field. I think thanks to my high school teacher, and I kind of stuck with it, and just learned to overcome any mental limitations I had at the time in terms of how much I can push my body and how much I can do, and that turned out to be fairly successful, at least considering my limited talent for the sport. And so I stuck with that, and that part, that explosive kind ofness. I used to be a sprinter, as you said, and so that I still do many of the things that kind of are based on that explosiveness. Be it now weightlifting or CrossFit, where it's jumping, it's pushing, it's pulling, that's always something that has interested me, and that is, I think, more conducive to my physical limitations than any ball sport.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I do definitely see like different body types tend to gravitate to their respective sports and interests and things like that. Did you also have an interest in nutrition as you were into like physical activity and sprinting?
No, not at all. I kind of wish now, I obviously I don't know, but I have a feeling that had I known what I know now about nutrition and the importance of sleep and, certain recovery aspects and everything that goes with it, I might have been more successful. But no, at that time, I knew nothing about nutrition. I didn't care about anything. No, nobody really. I mean, yes, you get, the standard parental advice. Eat more veggies. Don't eat. Go to McDonald's every day. But even that, I kind of ignored. I remember still sometimes, like once every 2 weeks or so, we would go to the movies and we would go through. There was actually a McDonald's directly attached to the movie theater, and I would, buy 10 cheeseburgers and like big, gallon of Coke or iced tea or what have you, and popcorn, and that's what I would have, during the movie. And I mean, just the incredible amount of junk that I consumed at the time, with zero appreciation for what that can do to or what it did to my body and to my recovery, and the proneness to get injured and all of those things. It still haunts me at night. But yeah, now
Yeah, interesting. It is kind of sad to look back on some of the things we used to eat and we used to fuel our bodies with. And we only get this one body. I think of one of our past guests, Ryan Talbot. He's a decathlon champion in the Big Ten, and he switched over to carnivore like last year. He's still 19, 20 years old. I mean, imagine being carnivore at that age, and imagine for somebody into athletics like that, what that person's going to be capable of. It's just going to be absolutely outstanding. That's amazing. So as you were eating that way and kind of changing your life, you moved over to the United States. What was going on with your health?
I had IBS for most of my life. Even back to when I was a small kid, back to my earliest memories, I always had like gut issues, and I thought they were either based on my genetics, because my dad had them too, still has actually, and his father had it too. He actually died of colon cancer, my granddad, at the age of 48. So gut issues have always been part of the parental side of my family. And, I just thought they were normal, and it never occurred to me that my diet had a lot to do with that. And when I came to the US, nothing really changed, because I adopted the American way of life, including the standard American diet, unfortunately. And so, it just kept going on. And then at some point, when we finally made changes to our diet, we switched over to a paleo diet. And back then, paleo diet was not really a strict carnivore diet, but very close to it. So we basically had steak and grilled zucchini. I think back then we didn't deseed them or peel them or anything, so it was the whole thing. But still, it was very much an elimination diet from what we did before. And within a week, all my gut issues were gone. Wow! And I'm like, wow! So this is how it feels to be normal and to feel good and to be full of energy and all of that. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I'm healed. And so that was like a major turning point for me to find out that, hey, what I eat significantly impacts how I feel, and especially my gut issues, since they were gone at, no, not overnight, but within a week, within a few days. And that was like an eye opener. And from that point on, we kind of, made our way through all the different diets that are somewhat related, to ancestral eating. We went from paleo to keto, and then from keto to carnivore, and then from carnivore to a more animal-based approach, similar to how Paul Saladino is eating. So with we are beekeepers, so we have honey, our own honey, so we eat raw honey. We eat sweet and seasonal fruits, and occasionally even things that I would normally not recommend to people, like for instance, sweet potatoes. We ferment them now. So we figured out that, okay, there are actually certain foods that, if prepared, if you want to jump through the hoops of going through those preparation phases, chances are you might be able to handle them, at least, in moderation. And sweet potatoes are a good example. If I just eat regular sweet potatoes or sweet potato fries, doesn't feel good in my stomach. If we ferment them and most of the starches are gone, and they're obviously peeled and everything, then I don't notice any negative impact. Maybe, in the long term there might be, but nothing that I can measure or feel, at least. So we kind of, started experimenting with a couple of things. And yeah, it's been going great.
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw the sweet potatoes on your Instagram. I thought they looked pretty decent. And I was thinking back to another one of our former guests, Dr. Bill Schindler, who opens his book, Eat Like a Human, by saying, like, plants should scare the hell out of you. It doesn't say don't ever eat plants ever. It just means be really thoughtful about the plants you choose, how much of them you have. And like you said, like, how are you preparing them? How are you cooking them? We don't prepare our foods the same way that, our ancestors did, or even just a few generations, the way a grandparent treated food is vastly different than the way we do today.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it was actually Bill Chandler who inspired me to, to try fermenting sweet potatoes and maybe start, playing around with, sourdough bread and some other fermentation techniques. Now I eat, sauerkraut again. I used to eat it when I was a kid, but then, completely went away from it as part of my more carnivore-based approach. But then I realized actually if it, fermented, it sits well with me, doesn't do anything bad for me. There might even be some benefits. I don't believe that I need sauerkraut in my life or any of the other, vegetables, but knowing that I can potentially handle them without, any negative or measurable side effects, that's good to know, because it makes the entire eating framework more compatible and easier to approach for other people who might, look at you and say, okay, it's great that you're doing this, but there is no way I could do this, myself. Especially, since you mentioned in the beginning with kids involved, it's significantly easier if you're a one-man show and you can do whatever you want to, regardless, not, being responsible for anyone around you or a partner who might have a different opinion on certain things. But as the more people there are, the more compatible, chances are the more compatible you need to make this whole thing. And so by finding certain ways of food preparation, by selecting certain, including certain sweet seasonal fruits, especially if you grow them in your own garden and you know where they are coming from and have not been treated with anything, it just makes life in a family context easier, I believe.
Yeah, that's amazing. I do want to make sure that we talk about that with you today. So when you're looking at carnivore, people that eat carnivore, you're right. I think people would look at the way that you and I eat and say, like, I can't eat that way. What you guys are eating, I couldn't do that same thing. It's way too restrictive. And they don't realize that we all had to go through that progression of diets. Yeah. It seems very, very similar with most people, where they're eating standard American, they feel terrible, they get off of standard American, maybe it's Mediterranean, or maybe it's paleo, I see very often, and they start to realize that, wow, I'm starting to feel better. And that drives the progression down these other diets to continue to see if you can notice benefits. So I'm wondering if you can think back to the times that you were transitioning from one to the next to the next. Do you remember of any, like, the specific benefits you were getting by switching as you were going?
Yeah, I mean, with paleo, as I said, it was my gut I felt the immediate change. And that was awesome for me, because, having IBS and, having to, deal with, restaurant breaks and all that thing, especially when you're working, when you're traveling, it degrades the quality of your life. So by having that out of the way, there was a significant improvement and a major milestone for me personally. With keto, I felt that mental clarity that many people talk about, where, suddenly you don't feel hungry in between meals because you're burning ketones, you're like a walking pantry, right? There is enough fat on anyone, regardless of how skinny you are, that the body can use for energy. So that the ability to fast longer, or to fast, period, to not get hangry and not deal with low blood, or with dips in blood sugar, to be able to work out in a faster state and still perform, because you're running on a combination of ketones likely, and also glycogen from that's stored in the liver and stored in muscle tissue, and just that mental clarity and focus, that was a major thing. But at the same time, I have to say, it already started towards the end of our paleo journey, that we transitioned to more and more of a modern version of the paleo diet, with buying cookbooks that teach you how you can make every dish paleo, how you can bake paleo, and of course with that comes nuts and seeds, or their flowers, and all kinds of things that are detrimental to your health, most likely. And they were certainly detrimental to my gut health, because I started having those issues again. And when I transitioned to keto, arguably an even more restrictive diet than paleo, you remove, entire food groups, all the high glycemic stuff. And so you're stuck with significantly less. So if you want to have something sweet, well then, let's make a keto treat out of nut butter and stuff like that. And that further aggravated my gut issue, or my gut, causing even more issues. So while my mental side was doing significantly better on keto, some other parts of my body, not so much. And after 3 years of keto, I'm like, okay, there is something, I thought that I would be healthier and better off because I'm doing, I'm living the better diet, which I consider, keto the next step above paleo. That wasn't really the case. It didn't really reflect in my overall health and well-being. And so by then realizing that, okay, maybe nuts and seeds and certain plants aren't good for me, and by transitioning then ultimately to a carnivore diet, even though only for a short period, to kind of, reset my gut and figure out exactly what types of plants I cannot have and should not have. That was then the next major thing. By going carnivore, again, gut issues gone. And then by slowly transitioning in or adding in certain fruits, certain plants, the least toxic plants, honey, aged cheeses or certain types of dairy, etc., and still feeling good, I'm like, okay, so this is, I guess, where I have the most flexibility, where I can be in keto on some days, and I can be carb fueled on others, and the same goes then again for the family, because that framework allows for a lot of flexibility. It doesn't have to, carnivore obviously by definition is a somewhat ketogenic diet, because in the absence of carbs, chances are you're burning ketones, right? So it's a keto diet. But if you add in certain other parts that make up an animal-based diet, you suddenly have the whole range from keto to some carbs to on some days maybe higher carbs, and then back to the other side.
Yeah, that's very well explained. And in that way, again, if you're looking from the outside in, these diets look very restrictive, but they're completely unrestrictive in the way that you can consume your calories, and they're unrestrictive in the way that you feel afterwards. Like having gut issues is restrictive. Having diabetes or high blood pressure is very restrictive. To not care when you eat because you always feel so good and you've always got that energy and you're just naturally like intermittently fasting. It's amazing. It's so different.
Yeah, man. And I think the problem is if you see food as a kind of as a reward, I think that's problematic, because if you see like, on Sundays I can have my pizza, that's my reward for dieting during the week. If you see it like that, you're not going to be able to sustain the dietary framework for very long, because the reward always wins. Your brain is just wired in a way to seek the reward, right? But if you see certain foods as toxic, like if I see someone eating a raw kale salad, or drinking a green smoothie or whatever, and I look at this, I'm like, poor that person, what they are doing to their health. Once you see certain foods in that way, you don't miss them anymore. I mean, it's just a way, it's a perspective shift, really, what it is that you have to go through to be able to say, I'm perfectly fine to not have those things because I know what they do to my body. It's the same thing as if saying, I don't miss not, wanting to, or not having a cigarette. I mean, I never smoked, so I don't have that, addiction component. But for me, looking at a cigarette is like, how could you? And the same goes with food. But at the same time, if you make the right choices, most of the time, your body, the human body is just incredibly resilient. Otherwise, we'd all be dead already. By decades of abuse, people still walk around and look half alive. So by having a robust and healthy metabolism, if I say, once every 2 months or so, we're gonna go out and have, pizza here in the local pizza joint. The worst thing that's in there is the white flour, which is better than whole grain flour, obviously. And it has olive oil, and it has tomato sauce, and it has, maybe some cheese on top. That's not by any stretch of the imagination a healthy meal, but it does nothing to me. It does absolutely nothing to me, And because my body can deal with that stressor that is that less than ideal meal, So I can still, partake in certain social events where, I don't want to be that guy, who doesn't eat any of it, because I've been to meals, and honestly, for many, many years, if I would go somewhere, what is business related or otherwise, and if the food was not compatible, I would not eat it. I would drink my water and say, I'm fasting, I would lick on my salt stone or what have you, look like a weirdo. I don't necessarily do that anymore. I'm more flexible now, because those few times where I have to make that choice, or if I choose to make that choice, I'll be perfectly fine. I don't fall apart because I have a crappy meal. I might not feel great, but me feeling not great is still better than most people feel every day.
Every single day. Yeah, no, that's such a good point. That's so well explained. What I'll tell people is like, make it count. When you do something like that, make it count. There's going to be some side effects to whatever you're eating, and you might not feel that great. I know for me, like if I have sugar, my anxiety goes through the roof. That for me, like no sugar, I can go the rest of my life and not have sugar because it's not worth the anxiety. But like what you're describing, to go have a pizza, like go to a really nice pizza place. Don't have like frozen pizza every single day.
Right.
You know, if you want a cookie, go get a really good cookie. Don't have a sleeve of Oreos every day. It's just really make it count.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and one thing that's important that I have kind of ignored, because I'm not a social butterfly, if you will. So the social aspects of eating never really did much to me, and my, let's say heritage from, people associate food with many things, I mean, I grew up on a certain diet, my grandma makes certain things, and so it occurred to me, when we visit my grandma, who's now 90 years old in Austria, and she makes a certain dish that she's been making for 90, well, maybe not for 90 years, but let's say for 75 years, then I'm gonna eat that freaking dish, regardless of if it matches my diet or not, because it's important to her. It's an important social aspect of our life, and it doesn't happen every day because she lives in Austria and I am in the US. So that social aspect of eating, I think, is also important, that I've disregarded for a very long time, not understanding that for other people, that whole social aspect is very important, maybe even more important than the nutritional aspect. And so you got to find a way to make it work for, if you want to improve your health, you got to make it work, and if that means preparing foods in a certain way or substituting ingredients or, whatever the case might be, then do that, instead of just sticking with your standard American diet and not making any changes at all,
Yeah, no, I really love that. Is it true that in Europe, like they don't obsess at all with like, what are your macros or how many calories are you eating? It's all just more cultural, and it's like, we make this dish because this is regional to this area and we've eaten it for centuries.
Yeah, I mean, Austria, like the rest of Europe, has certainly changed a little bit, has adopted or started adopting some of the things that are more popular over here. And that goes, for the longest time, I would have said, well, the Austrians are significantly healthier than the Americans, generally speaking. But not even that is true anymore. The rates of diabetes and high blood pressure and some of the other metabolic and diseases have gone up significantly as well because of the adoption of modern foods. I think all of that came with a certain delay from the US. Like, my grandma, she would, cook with butter, or tallow or lard, animal fats basically. But now if you look at modern Austrian kitchens, it's all seed oils, because the message has also transpired that butter and saturated fats aren't good, even though that myth has been debunked or was debunked already, I don't know, decades ago, really. But that sentiment that heart healthy oils, vegetable oils, polyunsaturated fatty acids are much better for your heart health than saturated fats and cholesterol, that has transpired in Austria too, and is now part of the culture, unfortunately. But to answer your question, no, I think at least not in my family, nobody counts calories. If I tell them, what are your macros, they don't even know what that is. So, it's much less, they just eat what they've always eaten, more than doing certain things because it's healthy. I would say even the resistance to change is even higher in Austria than it is over here, because my parents obviously see what I do and why I do it, and and the result of not only physical changes but all, overall, and they are still I hope you're doing the right thing, kind of.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's very well explained. It's really cool to understand the culture, but really sad to see that everywhere that these Western foods and modernized foods are getting, we're seeing metabolic health go down the tank. It really is sad. Okay, so when you yourself personally are making a change, it's not like you can just do this yourself. Like you've got your partner, you also have the kiddo. So let's talk about the two of you, the adults changing the diet. Were both of you on board from the very beginning? Did both of you want to change your diet, or was there some resistance there?
No, that was actually a major issue when I woke up one day and said, starting tomorrow, I'm going to do paleo. And my wife is like, what do you mean you do paleo? I'm the one who cooks, So if you do paleo, that means I need to do something different. And I don't really care, about, cooking for, two separate meals just because you want to do something different that I don't even know what it's about. And so no, I approached that maybe not in the best way I could have. So I didn't explain. I just, made a statement of what I'm going to do and expected everyone to, fall in line. So my wife wasn't very happy in the beginning, and it took her a while to do her own research and kind of, ask questions and get answers. And what is paleo? Why we are doing this? And the more we talked about it, the more she did her own research, the more she came to the conclusion that we need to change how we eat. And that was good, obviously, both from a perspective of our relationship, but also obviously our health and the health of our kids. And at that time, I think our youngest, Isabella, she was about 2 years old, and I still have pictures of her like chewing on a big chunk of bread and all. And I'm like, I wish we would have not done this, but we did. But yeah, it was then a transition, obviously, for us, for the adults, and then for the kids as well. But I don't know, maybe 2 years into paleo, I came up with the idea or discovered that keto is a thing. And I'm like, no, paleo, that's, that only gets us halfway there. We need keto. Keto is, the ultimate diet. So we're going to do keto from now on. Again, approaching it in a way that was not in a very partnershipy, so to say. And my wife again said, okay, if you want to do keto, you do keto. You just cut out the carbs and you eat everything else. So it was, much more doable without her having to change the way she cooked and the way she prepared her meals. And then at some point, she again did her research, said, okay, you know what? Maybe, eating so many carbs is not a good thing. We want to be in ketosis. We want to, do the fasting and all of that. So we roped that in, and that was then an important change at a time when our son was born prematurely, and when we kind of started to doubt, all the advice we've gotten from, his medical team in terms of, diet, his pediatrician and all, what he needs to grow, because he was relatively small for his age in the womb already, as well as then, when he was born. And they're like, oh, just feed him, sweet potatoes with brown sugar and stuff. And I'm like, we're not going to do this, he doesn't need any of that. He needs nutrients, and it's not coming from brown sugar or, the baby formula filled with seed oils. I mean, that's a whole nother issue because it's, at the time we had to supplement, or at least we were told we had to supplement the breastfeeding with extra formula to give him even more nutrients. And if, the best type of formula money can buy is just a piece of junk food, with artificial sweeteners and seed oils and all of that stuff that, I wish we would have never given to him. But we didn't know any better at the time. So it was, a little bit of a rough transition, and it took a while for both of us to really come to get on the same page and say, okay, this is where we are right now, food-wise. This is where we want to be, and how do we get there without creating any major friction points, without making your life as, our primary cook, if you want to say, because my wife's a stay-at-home mom, so she takes care of most of the things at home. How can we make this work so it works for everybody? And then of course, also with the kids. And that's, that was fortunately never an issue. We were always on the same page as far as the kids are concerned. But of course, with everyone around us, who realized how we are feeding our kids, and why are your kids on keto, or why, and they were actually most of the time in ketosis, but not because they didn't get any carbs at all, but because they burn carbs so quickly, at that age, that they were always depleted their glycogen stores overnight. In the morning, they were in ketosis, regardless of what they ate during the day. And so we kind of encouraged that, high fat, high protein type of diet. And that turned out fairly well for our kids. But of course, it was always an uphill battle with, the healthcare professionals who, took care of the kids, pediatricians, friends and family, and everyone around who was not used to, kids not eating mac and cheese and all of the stuff that, most American kids, eat.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to ask you if you experienced any pushback with people that learned,
Oh yeah,
by their understanding, they might think that keto is a fad or something. They saw it on a magazine
right.
at the grocery store, and so this is the next new diet, which is absolutely preposterous. It's totally ridiculous. It's the oldest
Right.
diet that we have. I wondered if you were getting pushback from people around you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, pretty much everyone, especially, the, at some point, especially with the youngest one, with Lucas, who was, as I mentioned, born prematurely. He was seeing a nutritionist, and I had fierce exchanges with her in terms of what he should and should not be eating. And we stuck to our beliefs, fortunately, and fed him what we thought was right, and it turned out. I mean, based on how he is right now, I think it was the right choice. Always high fat, high protein, very animal based. And whatever didn't sit well in his stomach, we just cut out. And he was on a very restrictive, quote unquote, restrictive diet that mimicked how we were eating, but he was doing well, and he has been doing well. And so,
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah.
I wonder if the same people that would push back on you would also like look at their lunch boxes, and probably they would just see a bunch of healthy food. Like there's something, terribly restrictive looking when you're following some of these diets, especially if you're doing it the right way. You're eating meat and probably some dairy and probably some fruits. There's not a lot of unhealthy foods there.
Right. I mean, I think the major misconception that a lot of people have is that you need carbs. Carbs are essential. And most people understand is that there are only two essential macros, and that's fat and protein. Those are the ones that the body cannot make. You need to get them from food. Glucose, on the other hand, you don't need carbs to get glucose. Body can make it from non-carbohydrate sources. Now, is it ideal to always do that in every situation, every stage of your age? I don't know. But body can make it. If you need glucose, gluconeogenesis takes care of you.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, one misconception that many have. But I also think, just ignoring the nutritional aspect, I think what weirded out a lot of people is the social aspect of what do you do if everyone else eats their or drinks their juice box and has crackers and whatnot, and your kid doesn't. Poor your kid, who feels socially awkward and who gets then bullied and what have you. And that is a real issue. If you go to a birthday party, and what do we serve at American birthday parties, kids' birthday parties? It's pizza and it's cake, right? The cake typically probably from Publix or some other grocery store filled with sugar and seed oils probably, and then the pizza is not going to be the original pizza from your high-end kind of pizzeria that uses only ingredients flown in from Italy. No, it's your Papa John's or Pizza Hut or what have you, again made with seed oils and with the crappiest ingredients you can think of. And so we said, our kids are not going to have that. We brought their own. My wife would bake a paleo muffin or what have you. Not that it's great food based on the diet that we have now, but at least it's significantly better and made with better ingredients than that cake. And instead of the pizza, well, they didn't have that. They just said, no, thank you, we're not going to have pizza. And it was very awkward at times. I cared less about it. My wife was a little bit more, felt a little bit more awkward because I just don't give a damn, about what other people think. And we talk to the kids and say, look, those, if you look around and look at how those kids look, not that we want to put them into certain categories, but just a reflection of their diet, you can see based on how many of those kids look, that's something we're trying to avoid. We want to live healthier, and they probably don't know that, and so they eat what they eat, and we just do it differently. And in the beginning, they didn't really understand, but now they do. And they're perfectly fine with that. And it was a process, but I think it was totally worthwhile sticking that out. And because now that they eat healthy 99% of the time, if they go to a party and say, you know what, can I pick between a slice of pizza or a slice of the cake? I say, yes, you can, because every other meal you have, is fine. And you're not going to a birthday party every week. It's once every couple of months. And when you do that, you can make the choice to eat something that's not good for you, much like we make the choice at times as well. And we still feel great because we are robust and we are metabolically healthy, But getting there was certainly a bit of a journey.
But like you said, your kids understand. You have explained this to them. They choose foods, which I think is super important. I've heard you talk about this on another show, which I thought was wonderful. But it's not, you're not forcing this on them. It's something that they're choosing. They understand. They can tie the correlation between the things they're eating and the ways they're feeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And especially with the younger one, with the one who was born prematurely, he has always had gut issues, soft stools and whatnot for the better part of his, well, the first couple of years. And so we told him, look, you have, issues in your gut because of something that you eat is not sitting well with you. So let's try the following. Let's remove everything but meat, only eat meat for a while. And then you add one thing in and another thing in and another thing in, and you see at what point you're having those gut issues again. And for him, that clicked because suddenly he ate something, I think it was nuts really for him. I think it was almonds or stuff that, once every so often, maybe for Christmas or whatever, my wife bakes maybe, cookies using nut flour instead of regular flour. And if he has them, he has gut issues, and he connected and he's like, I can't eat this anymore. I don't want to eat this anymore because otherwise I'm going to have gut issues and I don't want that. And that connection was very important for him to really figure out the connection between what he eats and how he feels. And now he is making those choices and we don't even have to tell him anything. I'm like, you pick what you think is best for you. And 9 out of 10 times he makes the right choice,
That's amazing. No, I think most parents, I understand it's really difficult out there. I understand that sugar is addictive and it's everywhere. And so I think most parents, I don't know, maybe they just don't do enough or don't give their kids enough credit that they'll be able to learn this stuff and make those associations. Just because everybody else isn't doing it doesn't mean your kids can't do it. And it might be a little awkward in the beginning and there might be a transition period, but you're going to get past that. And what a joy for these kids. How was their behavior change when they started eating all of these whole foods?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I never had with the exception of maybe our youngest one in the first 2.5 years or so. And her diet wasn't terrible either because at that point, obviously, he was too young to eat really junk food, but it was, maybe chewing on a bread or eating some Rice Krispies or stuff that, we don't eat now anymore. But beyond that, they always had a relatively solid diet made with whole foods. Maybe some of the whole foods were detrimental to their gut, and some other areas, but it wasn't like that they never had a candy. I think it took Isabella 8 years for the first time to try a candy. And and she's like, this is way too sweet,
That's amazing.
And that was, such a joyful moment for us because I'm like, okay, because she always seen other kids and like, can I try just one? I'm like, yeah, you try it out and tell me what you think, Know that it's not good for you, but you're not gonna die just because you have, that one, I don't know what it was. And she said, I don't like it. And now even for her, for certain celebrations, like, what, I don't want to have cake. It's way too sweet. Even the one that we make at home, sweetened with our own honey, for her, it's too sweet because she's not used to eating a lot of sweet stuff. And so, I think every kid can do that. You just need to give the opportunity to feed them real stuff and avoid some of the junk foods to kind of, reset their gut and reset the bacteria in the gut, because ultimately all those cravings we have, or many of those, come from, the type of bacteria that they have in your gut. If they thrive on junk food and you don't give it to them, you're going to have cravings. But once that bad bacteria, quote unquote, has died off and, you have a better composition of bacteria in your gut that thrive on, fats and protein and those kind of things, then you're not going to have those issues anymore. It's not a battle for the rest of your life is what I'm trying to say. It just takes a little bit of a transition period. And after that, you can let your kids, take the lead. They know what they need and what their body needs for the most part. And it's not an ongoing battle. But one of the things that, and I've said this, I think in one of my blog posts or in the YouTube video as well, one of the major things that we've done is remove everything from our pantry that we don't want our kids to have. So in other words, if they say, oh, can I get a snack? I'm like, yeah, go to the pantry, whatever you find, you can eat. You're not going to find any Snickers and any, those kind of things. You might find sweet plantain chips. You might find cheese crackers, with Parmesan cheese. Those are kind of the worst things that we have in the pantry, quote unquote. If you want to have one of those, have at it, But beyond that, there is nothing in our pantry that they cannot have, and so that just removes the argument from the entire situation, because you don't know, it's there but you can't have it. Well, why is that? Who is it there for? For you, why are you eating it if I can't? And it's you don't want to have the discussion.
That's great advice. My parents used to keep all the sweet stuff up at the very top of the pantry, and so you just learn how to like climb up. Exactly. You go to get the good stuff. It's so interesting. I love that you made that point. I think that's a wonderful point. Is just start by don't bring it in the house. I mean, I don't know, she's 87. I want to say my grandma at 87 years old decided to finally like stop buying candy and bringing it in the house. At that age, she lost like 50, 60 pounds. This just last year. And she did that one thing that you just said, don't bring it in the house. And it worked amazingly well, even at that age. There's another thing that you talked about that we mentioned briefly. Why is it so important to give your kids a choice?
Because I think we all want to feel empowered to be able to make choices, and for kids, as they grow and explore their environment and explore, how much power they have or not have. I mean, if you think about it, most of the things that our kids do, we decide for them. Okay, this is what you put, what clothes you wear, this is where we're gonna go, this is your, everything is decided for them. And it can be, I imagine, incredibly frustrating if you cannot make your own choices. And especially, with foods that you might like or not like, having to eat something that you absolutely don't like is horrible. I mean, I've gone through this, and when I was a kid, my mom said, this is what we're gonna have, and I'm like, I don't want it. We're like, why don't you sit on the table until it's gone, or you're not gonna get anything else. But by giving them choices, even if it's between meatballs that has liver mixed in and ribeye, if they pick the ribeye, okay, great, it's not a bad choice. I would have rather them pick the meatballs with the liver, but still they pick the ribeye. But I'm not, if they don't have a choice, you have an argument. And the funny thing is with kids, even if you offer them choices, where if you would offer only that one thing and they would say, no, I don't like this, but if they have two options that they don't really like, but they can make a choice between those two, chances are they're gonna stick with that choice, and they're gonna eat it anyway. It was their choice, that they made. They made that choice themselves, so they're gonna eat that. But if you would have only offered this one thing and say, hey, here are the meatballs with liver, like, I don't want this. But if it's meatballs with liver and something else, even if the something else is not their absolute favorite, they choose the lesser evil, so to say. It was their choice, and it's much more. You reduce friction at the end of the day, and you make the kid happier, and you empower your kids to make decisions and stick with them, and deal with the consequences, whatever they might be.
Empowering, right? That's the perfect word. It's empowering. It's giving your kids autonomy. Same with partnerships. You should always give your partner autonomy to make the choices that they want to make, and just provide a safe environment to do that. So I absolutely love that approach. I do have to clarify though, when you mention ribeye and consuming ribeye, you are referring to the steak and not referring to your dog named Ribeye. Is that correct? Not the dog.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, the dog is intentionally spelled with rib space I, so it's not to be confused with the ribeye.
Nice. Okay. Just want to make sure you guys were getting your dog over there. I love the name, by the way. I think that's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the supplementation. Why did you decide to start a supplement company?
It was really my wife who inspired me to consider having a physical product, because up until then it was mostly digital content that I would produce and monetize. Never had a digital product, and I thought, well, a supplement kind of makes sense because we're in that space. But I was thinking, okay, what supplement could that be that even if I make certain changes to my diet in a couple of years, for example, going from paleo to keto, I don't want to have a keto supplement and then suddenly I'm on an animal-based diet and I'm not in ketosis every day anymore. It kind of, would be odd to push that product without me really, embracing the framework that's around it. And so I'm like, okay, what is a supplement that I could see myself eating, or a type of food that I could see myself eating for the rest of my life? And be okay selling it and recommending it to others. And organ meats were kind of a no-brainer, because I think organ meats should be a central part of your diet, just in terms of getting all the micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, etc. but also appreciating that not everyone likes the taste and texture, and so freeze drying them or having a freeze dried option that's tasteless, that doesn't really smell like anything, and it's easy to consume, especially when you're traveling and when you don't have a chance to cook or prepare those things at home, are an ideal, type of product. And so we came up with liver as our first product, because I think liver is the king of organs. Not to borrow the Liver King's speech, but he's absolutely right saying that liver is king. Has most of the most nutrient dense food on the planet, and so starting with liver and then just adding on other supplements, maybe organ mixes, I should say, to fill specific needs or address specific use cases, was the most logical choice for us, and that's why we started with liver a year ago, and we just introduced heart and spleen a couple of weeks ago.
Nice, that's awesome. So what would some of the specific things, if I'm wondering whether I should be taking a supplement or not, what specific things would I notice in myself that would suggest like, wow, I need a little bit more of this in my life?
So yeah, it really depends a little bit, obviously, on your diet. If you're already on a carnivore diet and you eat eggs and maybe certain types of dairy and you're well covered, you might not notice anything in particular. I mean, honestly, since I've been eating fresh organs for over a year now, by adding on those freeze-dried supplements, I didn't know then a significant difference in terms of how I feel. But I have a lot of customers who are on a journey towards a healthier diet, who might not be on a pure carnivore diet or not on a pure animal-based diet. They're more like on a remove processed crap but eat everything else kind of. And especially those, I think, can really benefit from the nutrients and micronutrients in organs. I have a lot of customers that are deficient in iron, that have low energy levels, that maybe suffer from hair loss, that have bad bone or dental health, maybe because of they don't get enough vitamin K2. They might have enough calcium, but without K2, that absorption is negatively impacted. So you need the K2 as well. Liver is a great source of K2, and many other conditions. But I would say even for someone who's on a strict carnivore diet, who only eats red meat. I mean, there are different types of flavors of carnivore diet. There are some purists that only eat red meat and nothing else, and it seems to be working well for them. But I would argue that just red muscle meat doesn't provide you with all the nutrients that you might need in the long run, And so by adding in organs, be it fresh or freeze-dried, I think you can benefit even if you're on a carnivore diet already. And I use my own supplements on a daily basis because I know that my diet is pretty good, but not perfect. I don't get to eat fresh organs as much as I like because of supply chain issues, because of preparations, I'm traveling too, etc. So by just having the convenience, knowing that all of the vitamins and minerals that my body needs, I get in those few capsules, and I don't have to worry about if I don't get to eat fresh liver for a week or two, or if I'm traveling and my diet might be less than ideal because the eggs that I get on the road are not pastured, they are conventionally raised, or if the meat that I'm eating is not pasteurized, but from corn-fed cattle, etc. So just compensating and mitigating for all of those factors, plus intensely working out, the daily stressors, all of that, likely means that my body needs more nutrients. That if I am, in a chill out state on somewhere on the beach and just eating, steak every day and not having a worry in the world, So that's kind of my ultimate, pitch for why you should be consuming freeze-dried organs. And of course, anyone who is not on the dietary level as maybe we are, maybe someone who is a modified standard American diet, maybe who eats a lot of plants, thinking that that's where they get the nutrients from. For those, I would highly recommend, getting bioavailable versions of those micronutrients and bridging some of the things that you don't find in plants, be it B12, be it K2, and some of the other things, heme iron.
Yeah, no, I love that. I was just thinking that I never came across, these types of supplements until I got into the carnivore world. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Like if carnivores need it, then pretty much everybody else would need it as well. And it could benefit anybody on any kind of mixed diet.
Yeah, and you mentioned Bill Schindler in the beginning of the conversation, and I had a conversation with him as well, and I saw him actually at the I think it was the KetoCon conference a couple of months ago, and he said, and that stuck to me, one of the most important milestones in human evolution was when we transitioned from scavengers to hunters, where we had first access to the animal and to the organs and to the fat of that animal, because that allowed our brain to develop and the entire body to develop and really change in a significantly short amount of time. And that just tells me that, you know, organs are not just a waste product. If we had a major developmental milestone with getting access to organs and to the animal fat, then chances are we need those organs and animal fats to thrive, you know, and to maintain the health that we have right now and to, you know, improve it if you're not in good shape already.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's a really good point. I know there's some talk in the carnivore world about getting too much of the fresh organ meats or too much organs in general. Do you ever worry about that, or is that not something that's really much of a concern?
No, I mean, I wouldn't eat the liver of a polar bear every day, you know, which is super high in vitamin A, which can be toxic in certain concentrations. But I've yet to see anyone having any issues with vitamins and minerals from real food sources. I mean, typically overdosing happens when you have like synthetic versions that are like highly concentrated, like 5,000 times the amount, you know, hoping that some of it will stick and then maybe more sticks than what you need. And then you have issues. But I have yet to see anyone have any issues from eating liver every day. I mean, I consume, you know, definitely, you know, one serving of my beef liver supplement, which is roughly the equivalent of 1 ounce of fresh liver. I eat liver pate almost every day, and I eat fresh liver at least once a week. And just the other day, my mother-in-law is here, and we made liver. You know, I had like this, I think it was elk liver or something, and it was like a big chunk, and I thought, you know, we would slice it up, you know, cook some, and the rest we leave for later. She made the entire thing, and between the two of us, we probably ate 2 pounds of liver, you know.
Wow.
And you know, I've yet to see any negative side effects. I know that certain fat soluble vitamins, you know, that can accumulate and compound over time, but I eat so much liver, and I've, you know, never had any issues. So I think it's completely overblown. You know, someone saying don't eat enough liver. I don't know anyone who eats too much liver, you know, not even the liver king, you know. And so I think it's, you know, the bigger issue is not eating enough liver. Yes, don't eat the liver of a polar bear every day, or don't eat a pound of liver every day. You don't need that. But eating a few ounces every day is absolutely no issue. And the other organs, it's the same, goes the same for the other organs.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it was actually Dr. Bill Schindler. I want to say it was on Carnivore Cast with Scott Mislinski, said, think about the whole animal and think about the portions. Like you are going to end up with a lot more muscle meat than you are organs. You might get a few bites. And so every few weeks to have some, every week to have, you know, fresh raw, you're right. You're probably not going to, you know, bioaccumulate way too much vitamin A from doing that. Taking a small dose every single day covers the basis. And it's interesting to hear that opinion that most of us are too low and need a little bit more versus the other way around.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see, you know, if someone is, you know, eats nothing but liver every day, I mean, that doesn't accurately reflect how, you know, our ancestors, even modern hunter-gatherer tribes live. You know, they kill an animal, they share the liver, they share the organs, but they eat all the organs, you know. So liver isn't the only organ that has nutrients, but if you only eat one organ, you know, eating a little bit more of the liver, because that's the only thing you eat, is not an issue. Of course, if you eat an entire liver, an entire heart, an entire pancreas, entire kidney, you know, all in one shot, maybe you're getting too much, but who does that, you know?
Yeah.
I've not met anyone yet.
That's right. Yeah, you don't see that at all. Your blog is fantastic. And I know part of the blog is indirectly working to help the supplement company. You know, we put out free content to help build our brand and our services. Yours is so well done. But besides the supplements, you're not selling anything. Like, you don't do a lot of like formal health coaching. What is your motivation to share your message?
You know, I would hope that, you know, if someone reads what I put out, that they don't have to go through all the hoops that I've gone through, you know. And because, you know, it took me 10 years, you know. You don't have to take 10 years to get to a better place, you know. You spend 1 year, you know. It is a journey, obviously. You don't want to go from 0 to 100. I mean, some people do, and that's great if you can, but most people would be overwhelmed by, you know, just adopting my or maybe your, you know, lifestyle overnight. But you don't need to spend 10 years. You don't need to feel miserable, have, IBS for 10 years. If there is a solution that you can implement fairly quickly, and so that's really my motivation to, to help people get better quicker than, the experience that I made. And plus, obviously, with everything I do, and with all the affiliates and display ads and stuff, that pays for me, so I can continue doing that. That's obviously motivation as well, because if I don't earn any money with what I do, I couldn't be doing it. I quit my day job actually this year in April, to focus only on my blog and my supplements. And so, there is certainly, that motivation as well to, being able to keep going and really living my dream. That's why I'm always very appreciative of every reader and everyone who, leaves the comments, or especially the positive ones, because ultimately, those are the people who make my life possible. And in return, I'm going to share with what I know, and hopefully, people can use that to better their health and better their life, and follow their passion, do what they are passionate about.
Yeah, that's amazing. I knew you would answer something like that as far as your motivation. It's really clear that you have really good motivation at heart, and you're sharing such a great message in a way that's really understandable. And you're right. Like, it's been, 15 years of blood, sweat, and tears to get to where I am in this understanding of nutrition, and understanding what we talked about in the very beginning. The vegetables are not good for you. They can actively be bad for you. Like, you've got to swim upstream for a long time to get to that information. And so I really appreciate that that's what you do. I love your Instagram account, where you're also putting all the pictures up of all the fun things you've got going on, and your chickens and all the stuff you have at home. Is just so awesome. We really so much appreciate you. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Yeah, I mean, michaelkummer.com, my blog, obviously is a great resource for if people want to learn more. Follow me on Instagram, mkummer82 is my handle there. In terms of my supplements, very easy, shop.michaelkummer.com. So I just made a subdomain. They can find that there. And I have a YouTube channel as well. It's not quite as well maintained. Well, it is well maintained, but I don't spend as much time producing YouTube videos as I do producing written content. But yeah, I have a couple of YouTube videos out there as well, that are complimentary, and for some people who prefer watching video over reading an article. And yeah, those are the three places probably that's
fantastic.
are best.
That's great. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Michael Kummer, thank you so very much for everything that you do. If nothing else, the way you're raising your kids and being an example for other parents, I just so hope the parents out there that hear this, change things, try things a little bit different. Just because everybody else isn't doing this doesn't mean you can get this to work. And we don't have kids yet. We're going to at some point, and I'm really very much looking forward to not letting them eat any vegetables. But the way that you're doing it and giving them the choice and the autonomy, I think is wonderful. So thank you for everything that you do, and thank you for coming on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Casey, for having me. I appreciate it.
It was such an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.